All right. Tim, does it bother you that your name is in a file in my office? I just noticed that. It's official. Tim Taylor covered. It said what you covered the week you taught. Just so I didn't repeat those. I had to put those in. You're famous now. My file knows you. Thanks for doing that. I bring you greetings from Randy and Lisa Boyd, who are at a funeral visitation and said they would be joining us online for tonight's class. So, if you have not been in here, and I don't know if that's anybody or not, but if you have not been in here, we are looking at hard sayings of Jesus. Difficult, it may be hard or difficult at times to understand, and sometimes I think the hardness or the difficulty is not so much in understanding what is meant, but it could be hard to swallow. I think we get both, depending on what exact phrases we're looking at. We could have things, what does he mean by this? And then we could have things that are just sort of gulp, and don't go down easy, And so I think both are possible any night that we have met on this quarter's topic. So last week we were in Matthew chapter 10, verse 34, came not to bring peace but a sword. We talked about that. Tonight we're going to Luke 17 and verse 6, or Matthew 17 verse 20, regarding a faith that moves mountains or removes mountains. And so that's where we are tonight first, and we'll get to another one here in just a little bit, I think. So Luke chapter 17, let's begin in verse 5, and then we'll get the primary phrase there in verse 6. And the apostle said to the Lord, "Increase our faith." So the Lord said, "If you have faith as a mustard seed, you can say to this mulberry tree, 'Be pulled up by the roots and be planted in the sea,' and it would obey you." Let me pause right there and go over to Matthew, or go back to Matthew chapter 17, and look at the wording in Matthew 17 and verse 20. That page is sticking together tonight. If somebody's there and wants to go ahead and read it, you can.
Jesus answered, "Because your faith is too small, I'll tell you the truth. If your faith is as big as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, 'Move from here to there,' and it will move. All things will be possible."
So, what's meant here? And the difficulty in the saying may not be, what does he mean? That may not be, what does this actually say, but what did he mean by it? I don't think it's hard to understand what he says, but what does he mean? Because the idea of a literal say to this mountain and it's going to go somewhere, well, certainly not. So what's he talking about? And when he in the Matthew account, when he says nothing will be impossible for you, there are things that are impossible for me. Okay? There are things that were simply not going to happen. Okay? I was never going to win the Boston Marathon. Okay? I was never going to run a 4.240, Tim. I was never going to run that. So I was limited to 4.3. But anyway, just seeing if you're listening. There are things that were impossible. Okay? There are certain things that weren't ever going to happen, right? Sometimes, by the way, Philippians 4:13, I think we do a little bit of a disservice in Philippians 4:13. And we mean well, and we try to bring a Christian principle, and maybe it's a parenting situation with a child. We're trying to be encouraging, and we say, there's nothing you can't do if you put your mind to it. That's not true. Okay? That's just not true. And so we don't want them to be disappointed. We don't need to misuse the meaning of Philippians 4:13, which has nothing to do. Philippians 4:13 has zero to do with you can do anything you put your mind to. That has nothing to do with that concept at all. Um, and so Paul's talking about I've been here and I've been here. I've been elevated, I've been abased. I've been in the penthouse and I've been in the outhouse for Christ. I've been all over the map. He was a Pharisee. I've been praised for my spiritual well-being, and I've been shipwrecked or imprisoned or threatened my very life for being in Christ. I know how to this and I know how to this. I can do all things. I can do what I need to do. I can accomplish what I need to accomplish. I can keep my faith, which he'll write about later when he says, I fought the good fight, finished the course, kept the faith. I can be what I need to be in Christ because He'll give me the strength to be what I need to be in Him. This is not about you can do anything you put your mind to kind of thing. Just a general proverb almost for living life. We sometimes do that a disservice. I don't ever want someone to begin to doubt the Word of God because a well-meaning parent or Sunday school teacher or coach or somebody misused something in the text because it sounded like it ought to fit. And as soon as something's impossible in this statement, as soon as they can't do something, even though they put their mind to it and gave the best effort they could, and they didn't win in that thing or become that thing, I don't want them to ever doubt the Word of God because that's not what the Word ever said. So there was no problem with the Word. That's not what it ever said. And so I think sometimes we do it a disservice. So we want to be mindful of this statement on the backside of the primary statement, the one that comes in Matthew where he says, nothing will be impossible for you. Okay, so this can be a hard statement when we start talking about the phrase, a faith that removes or moves mountains. Okay, number one, I think what's discussed here are the limitless possibilities that are open to faith. Not you could be a fireman or an astronaut. The limitless possibilities that are open to faith. Jesus uses analogies, of course, all the time. He uses so many different types of illustration, but he uses analogies from the natural world to emphasize faith's power. And that's what we're referencing here in what we call the mustard seed principle. Anybody ever seen a mustard seed? Yeah. Well, I have a jar of them. Got them over there. They're tiny. Ever seen a mustard bush? Yeah. It's a big old something. Especially compared to, like, I can't get my finger small enough. I can't get the hole small enough. And when you make that comparison, you understand why the Lord used what He used. And certainly He would know. He made it, so therefore He would know how small it would be. And it's a tremendous picture. But the mustard seed principle, an analogy from the natural world to emphasize the power of faith in accomplishing great things. So somebody go to Psalm 46. Just kind of hold your place here. Go to Psalm 46 and verse 2, please. And if you'll just read it when you get there. Psalm 46 and verse 2.
Therefore we will not fear though the earth should change, and though the mountains slip into the heart of the sea.
We are not afraid. Why? We have faith. It's not we can't sense it. It's we're not going to be it. Be is a continual thing. Be is a burdening thing. I'm in this thing and it affects my life. It affects my choices. Here's an example. Job. Job would say, though he slay me, yet will I trust him. Now, when did he say that? He didn't say that when he was sitting around and all was well. And they're just sort of sitting around the campfire, and he says, you know, if I ever encounter hard times, I just want to say this. He was waxing eloquent by the campfire when his life was good, and he made that statement. No. He made that statement in the midst of the suffering. And it wasn't that he wasn't feeling it. He didn't recognize it. He was zapped because of his faith in God with an inability to feel the pain or feel the suffering or sense it or be burdened by it and hate it even. It wasn't that. That's why he said, though he slay me. If we have to go even further, though he slay me, yet will I trust him. And so it's not about what we don't feel. It's the human side is going to feel the thing, going to notice the thing, going to hate the thing, perhaps. But faith is what I do in the midst of all that. So when he says what he says in Psalm 46, verse 2, we are not afraid, he's talking about what we're going to choose in the midst of it. We're going to choose faith. Everybody in the room is familiar with the song, Faith is the Victory. But how does the victory start? It starts with an opportunity to have to choose faith. The victory starts with the opportunity to have to choose faith. In John 11, the Lord has not yet gone to the tomb. He's not yet with Mary and Martha because He's waited. And Lazarus, who had lay sick, early verses of John 11, has now passed. So He waits on purpose. And when He gets there, she says, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. And Jesus said, did I not tell you that if you would only believe, you would see the glory of God? But that death has to take place before she can see the glory of God. The death has to take place before she can see the glory of God. You don't get a risen from the dead until you have a dead, right? So the opportunity, faith is the victory, but the victory starts with an opportunity. What's the opportunity? It may not seem like much of an opportunity. You've got to suffer for my name. May not seem like I'm going to allow a time of difficulty in your family. I'll allow this cancer. I'll allow this lost job. I'll allow whatever it may be. The victory starts with an opportunity to choose faith. David had faith to do what? Well, he had a faith that was strong enough to walk out when nobody else would and battle the giant mano a mano in a field that I've stood in. That is a fascinating moment. I can tell you. And you know you're there. It's not like some places in the Middle East and in the Holy Lands. It's not like some places where you kind of know you're in the general area of something. Or, well, yeah, it happened, but it happened about probably 50 feet below my feet because that's how far down the old road is now in some spot. Or, well, we don't know, it happened in this valley, but look how big this valley is. You know how long it would take for your foot to hit every spot in the valley? I mean, are you just gonna do this and then turn and go back the other way and then turn, and it's gonna take you, 6 days to cover the valley and say, I've been on the spot. Okay? In the Valley of Elah, that's not the case. And there's only 2 ridges. So you don't have to, okay, which one of these 2? You got 2. So we know the Israelites are on one. The Philistines were on the other. You've got one brook in the middle. I've been there. That's a moment. Okay? What did David, and you think about that. You think about that when you stand there. It's just it's an awesome thing. David had the faith to do what? Well, for example, he had the faith to do that. The disciples and the apostles had the faith to do what? And the emphasis here is do. Faith does. Faith without works is, finish it, dead, being alone. So it's not faith if it doesn't move. Faith moves. Faith acts. Faith does. The apostles or disciples had faith to do what? Well, for example, in the early chapters of the book of Acts, Peter had the faith to say, do with me what you will, but I'm going to keep preaching. And he was threatened multiple times in the first 6 chapters of the book of Acts. Paul had his similar threats later. They had the faith to stand there and say it anyway and do it anyway. How does faith accomplish so much? How does faith accomplish so much? Now remember, somebody had to stand up and thunder the gospel in Acts 2. Peter certainly knew what this group who would not like the message was capable of. Because in Luke 22, he sat by a fire with them. What had just happened? They had just taken away his Lord. And they were about to go through a sham trial. By the way, a real interesting study. Matt Vega, Dr. Vega at Freed Hardeman, does an outstanding seminar for congregations on, might be something we should try to have here sometime, on the trial of Jesus. Matt's a lawyer, and years ago he went back and looked at the Jewish law and the Roman law, and he put together a seminar about the showing how many of their own laws they broke in rushing this trial through, and the time of night, and everything related to the arrest, trial, and crucifixion of Jesus, and how many of their own laws they broke. All the while acting like we're concerned with a lawbreaker. You know, it's a fascinating thing that he does. But they had Peter, who had to know what they were capable of doing. He had seen it happen. But if Peter doesn't get up, if somebody doesn't get up and do that, what do we have in Acts 2? This was God's choice, which has always been fascinating to me, that His choice, not just the events of Acts 2 and the establishment of the early church on the day of Pentecost, but who He chose for it. That's fascinating to me. You know, because in football, it's football season. If a quarterback is just, I don't know where his head is tonight, I don't know where his head is, there's a backup over there. And every coach is different, but at some point in time, he gets the hook. We'll see if so-and-so can do any better, you know. And so Peter had failed miserably. Just days earlier, Peter had failed miserably. And he's the guy in Acts 2? That's always been fascinating to me. Saul to be Paul, he's the one doing it. Why wasn't he the one who was throwing them in prison and holding the coats while they stoned Stephen and so on, asking for letters to be able to do what he was doing? What did they have the faith to do? How did they accomplish so much? They accomplished it by staring it down and saying what was needed to be said and doing what needed to be done. So look again at verse 6. So the Lord said, if you have faith as a mustard seed. Okay, what's He saying? A measure, even just a measure of faith. He chose what He chose to say. I can tell you what preachers and elders hear often. I'm not there yet. However it's said, sometimes that's how it's said. I'm not there yet. I hope I can get there. I hope I can be like you or be like brother so-and-so or sister so-and-so. I'm not there yet. So He gives a mustard seed. He doesn't say, if you have faith the size of whatever the largest tree of the day was, He didn't even go to the bush, which was being referenced by the seed. He goes to the smallest of the small. That's important. Because I promise you, there are people in every congregation, good-hearted people, that believe they have got to grow a seed of some, whatever that is in their mind, of some certain size before they are competent or qualified, able, pick your word, to fill in the blank. I'm just not there yet. Well, there's a couple of things, by the way, that you can say. You want to say it right. You want to be kind. You want to be patient. You want to be loving. But I'll tell you what I said to somebody one time when they said, I'm just not there yet. And this person was raised in the same congregation I was raised in, so I know what they got in classes and in the pulpit. They were in my class, so we were raised together. I'm just not there yet. And I said, well, get there. Now, here's what I knew. What I knew was they had had every opportunity I'd had. They owned one of these. They owned it then. They owned multiple. And what we were talking about was teaching their sibling who was outside of Christ, and this is when we're full-blown adults into our late 20s. I'm not there yet. I don't know enough. Now, if you become a child of God at age 13 and you're 28 and you say, I don't know enough, we'll get there. Because you can. But preachers and elders hear it all the time. They hear it all the time. I'm not, so he goes to the mustard seed on purpose. I'm not asking you to have this, whatever that is, be this, whatever that is, or whoever that is in your mind. Oh, if I could be like brother or sister so-and-so. I'm not asking you to. Because when brother or sister so-and-so are accomplishing such and such, they're doing it through me. Now go back to the Old Testament. Who did God choose? Well, just throw out some Old Testament heroes of faith, maybe, or at least Old Testament characters who had great accomplishment that we studied about when we were in Sunday school. Gideon, Moses, Abraham, Noah. All perfect answers, and we could name more. And as you continue to name, not just with those, this is true about each of those, but others you could name, there's something about them that makes them not the person you would think would have been chosen. I mean, Gideon said, my family's the least in town, and I'm the least in my family.
You got David, who was the least of the sons.
Least of the sons. Nothing imposing about him either, by the way, when he goes to... Of course, nobody was imposing to Goliath, but still. David's the least of the sons. Gideon says, my family's the least in town, and I'm the least in my family. So this is the bottom of the barrel. Gum on the shoe, whatever. Moses tried everything he knew to try in Exodus 3 and 4 to say, I'm not the guy. If you look at what he says numerous times, numerous ways, he says, I'm not there yet. And by the way, the Lord answered each one of those objections or reasons for a while. And the last thing that happened is not another answer from the Lord. This verse. The last thing you see before Moses does it, decides I better do this, is not the perfect answer from the Lord. It's then the Lord's anger was kindled against Moses. So Moses was at least smart enough to go, oh, you know. Do you remember the look or the clearing of the throat or whatever it was when you knew you had pressed the limit as far as you could press it with mom or dad when you were growing up? Why? Because here's the thing. You're making it about you and your abilities or lack thereof. But I'm telling you, Jesus says, this. And why this? Why would He use that? He uses that to remind them it's not a, I need a willing participant, and that's all I need. That's all I need is a willing participant. If I want something to get done, I'm going to get it done. I don't even need you to get it done, but you have the privilege of being a part of this. And I want you to do this. If you have faith as a mustard seed, don't miss that, the mustard seed principle. What is the Lord asking for? And also, what is He stating about the power of faith? He's saying, in one sense, it doesn't take much with me. So, God sees intent. Can you think of a Old Testament story that screams God sees intent? It's a famous, the one first coming to my mind is a very famous event in Old Testament history in Genesis. And it clearly shows that God looks for intent. And that's all He needs. Abraham and Isaac. 2 words, sounds like. Yeah. Stays the hand. God sees intent. And so Jesus, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. Jesus, the earthly picture here of the nature and character of God, which has never changed. Old Testament stuff, New Testament. Nature and character of God has not changed with the New Covenant. So we go back to the Old Testament and situations like that, and we see God sees intent. Now, Jesus speaks to intent when He uses the mustard seed principle. God sees whether or not I've got that and I'm willing to believe, and with Him, that's all that's needed. Now, is it possible an individual has to go far to show the mustard seed? Abraham went out what? Not knowing where he was going. By faith so-and-so did this, by faith so-and-so did that. And what they did, all those listings in Hebrews 11, not easy, time-consuming, breaking family ties, threatened all the while, perhaps, some of them, or ridiculed. You mentioned Noah earlier. Ridiculed. God sees intent, but the intent it may take a while to show the intent. How have you seen this? How have you seen this? Give me an example, if you're willing. Give me an example of how you've seen this be true. And I mean in a direct way, not something you heard about. But if we can't get there, we'll take an indirect.
Most times, those that will say, I'm not there yet, at age 22, at age 42, they're still not there. They'll use that as an excuse. I was 38 when they asked me to be an elder. Some will say that I had believing children who were baptized. I was an elder for a lot of years. I was afraid the congregation needed elders at that time. And if you have that, just a mustard seed, I had more than that because I taught Bible classes for 18 years. But if we use the faith that God gives us, it doesn't take much. You try God's way, and it'll always work.
You wind up seeing that. You wind up seeing it over time.
One thing that came to my mind was the people that started this congregation, it's my understanding that some of the men, they co-signed a loan to put their whole livelihood on the line with the faith that it was going to grow.
Yeah.
And it did.
Yeah, slightly. Yeah, there you go. Their livelihood. You see that, by the way, at the close of Acts 2 and at the close of Acts 4. You see people doing that very thing. Giving up their own so that this thing can go. Okay? Have faith as a mustard seed. Jesus, of course, I mean, goes without saying, but let me just emphasize, Jesus always knew what to use to make the point. Yeah, when he's talking about humility and recognizing dependency, what does he do? He grabs a child, right? He doesn't try to teach the principle in some way that would be more difficult for them to understand. He presents them a picture. As soon as he starts talking about, what is this? This is dependent on. So he always knew. He knew which illustration to use. He knew which one here. A mustard seed. He didn't say if you have faith as vast as as Mount Sinai, something of that nature. He always knew what to use to make the point. The emphasis of this statement is not about doing the impossible with regard to physics. Okay? There's no physics lesson here. You can move mountains. Okay? There's an illustration of the power of faith when there's a willing party just obeying God. That's the emphasis. It, to me, is that simple. If you don't have anything else on that, we'll go to another saying.
My father used to always say, my father was the minister in rural Illinois for the first part of my life. Had 4 kids, not much money coming in. And he used to always say when things got really, really, really tight, I'm afraid people take this wrong way, but someone would die or someone would get married. He would either preach a funeral or he would preach a wedding. And the money that came just at the right time. You can
Yeah, that's all he meant.
Providence or whatever, sometimes I've often said that in my lifetime, if we were short on money, someone's car needs to be fixed. But I can only imagine that at some point in time, when my refrigerator went out, some refrigerator salesman used a little extra money. It works its way around. Sometimes you're the person that's providing providence, and sometimes you're the person
Receiving it.
accepts it.
Yeah, no doubt. Charles Caudle, longtime president of World Christian Broadcasting. When I first started there, I was there 18 years. Charles was president 24 years. In those early days there, for me, he told me about a lot of the early days of that ministry, which had been going a long time before I got there. I guess it had been going 18 years when I got there. And he told me about days when it was coming to the end of the month and they had payroll and that sort of thing. And, you go to the mailbox every day and how many checks do we have and, that sort of thing. And he told me about 2 or 3 specific occasions early on in his presidency there when we needed X amount. And it's Friday the 29th. And guess what amount? One of those times, 1 check. 1 check in the mail that day, and it was for that exact Other times it might have been a larger amount. It took 7 or 8 checks, but those were there that day. Okay, we got, you know. Exactly. That's, yeah. I like how you put that, by the way, at the close, especially. Sometimes you're the grantor, sometimes you're the receiver. I don't know if you use grantor, but you're the provider of it. Yeah.
Sometimes God uses you, and sometimes God uses someone else to help you.
Yeah.
Listing these heroes of the Bible, the Old Testament, and most of them see the idea. I haven't read in my Bible, probably heard it quote, may have come from Bill, I don't know. God is interested in our ability or our inability. He's interested in our availability.
Yep.
We are capable. We have this little mustard seed. We are capable of doing something.
He told Moses in Exodus 3, he said, I'm not eloquent. And God's first response is not what you might think it is. Now, eventually I said, then the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses. But not yet. He answered that this way. He said, well, I'm not eloquent. Because he's wanting him to be his spokesperson to the Pharaoh. Well, I'm not eloquent. And he says, who made your mouth? I love that type of answer. Because he wants Moses to be logical. Moses, do you believe that I created you? Yes. That tongue that is necessary for you to speak. Do you believe I put that there? Yes. Well, don't you think if I put it there, I can guide it? We got to be logical in faith. Learn to reason from the greater to the lesser. You know, if we're going to get up and sing, there is a God, He is alive. There is beyond the azure blue a God concealed from human sight. All these things we sing about that are true, obviously, and we believe about our God. We say He can do all this and hold it all in check in the palm of His hand. And then I'm going to say, I'm not so sure He can handle my situation. Please understand how I mean this. You're nothing to Him. Your problem is nothing to Him. If He can do that, He's got no trouble with you. Unless you just won't cooperate. If I can do this, I got no trouble doing this. Learn to reason from the greater to the lesser. And so he used that method with Moses. Who made your mouth? Who placed your tongue? Well, then probably I can guide it.
Story of Esther. Mordecai talks to Esther when things are going really bad. And she's trying to explain to him that she can't do what he wants her to do. Because she lives in the palace and she comes when she's asked. And he tells her, he said, don't you think that the reason why you're where you're at right now isn't for this very thing?
Mm-hmm.
But if you're unwilling to do it, don't you worry. God will make sure that it gets done. But you'll have to answer why you did it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that reminds me, that's a great example in the Old Testament that is really parallel with this example in the New Testament. Gamaliel, early chapters of the book of Acts, they're stirred up against Peter again, and they're going to threaten again, and they really want to take him and kill him. What they wind up doing is just kind of giving him a slap on the wrist and a warning. And because Gamaliel said, oh, and he was this respected man, and they realized him as such, and he said, guys, look, a while back, now I'm paraphrasing, a while back so-and-so came through town claiming this, and that turned into nothing. And then after him, so-and-so came through town claiming to be, and that turned into nothing. Just calm down, because if this thing is not from God, it'll go the same way as all those did. And then he said, but if it is, you won't be able to stop it anyway. And you don't want to be on the wrong end of that. That's very much like the statement regarding Esther that Gamaliel reminded them. So, all right, I'm going to give you a commercial for next week, and we'll just kind of get into the very outskirts. We won't have time to get into city limits. We're going to be in Mark 10, 17 through 22. So if you want to study something, go there. The key verse is Mark 10, 21, but Mark 10, 17 through 22 is the full context of what we're going to talk about. This is under the concept of sell what you have. Sell what you have. Go and sell what you have. Okay, so who are we talking about here? One thing you lack. Go and he goes away sad because what? He has great wealth. Okay? So we're going to be in Mark 10, and then we're going to be in Leviticus 18. I don't expect you to write all this down, but I'm just sort of telling you what we're doing. Mark 10, 17 through 22. We'll go to Leviticus 18 for just a very brief moment. Then we'll be in Matthew 19, then Luke 8, then Matthew 6, then another place in Matthew 6 later on, all to answer the questions of Mark 10, 21. Sell what you have. Does the Lord expect us to be not just a community of believers, not just a community, but a commune, which is completely different, obviously. I'm going to tell you up front, no. Well, then what about the meaning of, we'll talk about that, what is meant there. So that could be a hard saying, go and sell what you have. Now, does that mean, is the Lord ever opposed to that kind of generosity? Is He ever opposed to it? Well, certainly not. But is this an expectation of God for His... Well, there is an expectation there that comes from this. It's just not the expectation some have made it out to be, I believe. So, we'll talk about that. And obviously none of you have done that either. So, and I don't expect that now, between now and next Wednesday night, that'll wind up being the case. So we'll talk about that. And then when we get finished with that, which I don't think will take a long time, we're going to go to Matthew 22 and verse 14. Many are called, but few are chosen. That can be a tremendously difficult thing for some people. This is why Romans 9, 10, and 11 are very difficult for a lot of people, for most people. Romans 9, 10, and 11. Many are called, few are chosen. I'll go ahead and tease you on that just a little bit to say this. When somebody takes basically a Calvinistic view, when somebody takes a view of how most mean predestination, this is all predetermined. I will tell you, God did predetermine something. He did. But think in terms of predetermining a people rather than a person. What God predetermined was a category of people, not individual people. A category of people, not an individual person. That's what Scripture teaches. We'll deal with that statement too. So, that whosoever would be conformed to the image of His Son. Well, that's their choice. He predetermined that. That's predestination. There's a destination that I'm determining ahead of time for those that will be conformed to the image of His Son. That's a category predetermined. Who's there? I've already determined. This is the category that's going to go there and live eternally. That's not John, yes. Mary, no. Susie, hadn't decided yet. So on. That's not, no. Scripture does not teach that. So there is such a thing as what God predetermined, but it's not that view. that's accurate, if that makes sense. Okay, we're out of time.